Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. After the secret call, the Prophet ﷺ said, we're not going to convey this message publicly just yet. But after a while, which actually took about a few years, this call remained secret. They continued to pray in secret. They continued to call only the few people that they trusted. And this was not publicly declared in Makkah yet. But obviously, it's a small city, people talk, tribal, relations. So the message was kind of known, it was kind of getting around, but no one was making a big thing about it because no one was openly proclaiming it. It was kind of like, if people want to worship whatever they want to do, it's not a big deal. It doesn't make a big deal. If few people want to do it, that's fine, not a problem. But after a few years of this secret call, there was about 50 believers. Okay, by the third year, there were about 50 people who had accepted. So, better than nothing, not that high though, not that high. Now the verses are revealed to the Prophet ﷺ saying, now openly proclaim what you are commanded and turn away from the idolaters. Meaning that now you have to clarify and make it very clear that we're against idolatry. Now the message has changed a little bit in the sense that now the step or the phase that's being entered now is a different phase. And it says, indeed we will suffice you against the mockers. Now, there's no mockers yet, right? No one is mocking, no one is making fun of them, no one's doing all of these things yet. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't worry, we know what's going to happen and we're going to take care of you. You don't need to worry about that. And another verse said, and warn your family, and warn your tribe. So meaning now it's time to warn everyone. We're not just your immediate family, meaning warn the entire tribe, warn everybody. So the Prophet ﷺ, he understood that now the mission is entering into a new phase. What needs to be done in this phase? People need to publicly know about Islam. So the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ does is he ascends a hill. And there's a hill that was there. It's a special hill where people used to make very important announcements. Rarely used, right? It's like an entire city-wide announcement. So if some messenger goes on top of the hill, it means everyone is going to come and gather at the bottom of this hill, at the foot of the hill, to hear what's going on. Something really, really important is going on. So the Prophet ﷺ goes and he ascends on top of this hill, and he proclaims out loud. Now everyone important person had been sent over here, or they sent one of their messengers to go find out what's the news, what's going on. So the Prophet ﷺ says, O people of Quraysh, telling everyone, Quraysh meaning everybody, would you believe me if I told you that there's an enemy behind this hill ready to attack the city? And this is very, very important statement that he's making here. He's asking them, I'm standing on top of the hill, you guys are down there, so I can see you and I can see what's behind me as well. So if I told you that I'm able to see that there's an army, a giant army coming, and they're about to attack the city right now, would you believe me? Right? Now this is the thing is, they don't have much time to climb up the hill themselves. If there's really an army on the other side, that army is going to come into the city and is going to destroy them. If they don't grab their weapons, grab their armor, go lock themselves inside their houses, prepare for war. There's not much time. So the answer they gave was, of course we would believe you. Why? Because you're not a liar. You're not someone who would make something up like this. You're not someone who would do, we trust you very much. If it was somebody else on the hill, maybe not. But for you, very clear. Your reputation has been the trustworthy, Al-Amin. You're the guy who helped rebuild the Kaaba. You're the one who participated in the Pact of Excellence. You're the one who solved other issues. You're very well known. We keep our valuables with you. All of that reputation now is coming back to their minds and thinking, this is a guy we can trust. Why should we not trust him? Now, the important thing to understand is why the Prophet ﷺ said this instead of just going and saying, you know what, people of Quraysh, I'm receiving revelation, I'm a prophet, you should believe. There's no reason why you shouldn't believe, and if you don't believe, you're going to the fire of hell. Or if you believe, you're going to paradise. Why didn't he just come straight forward with the message? Why did he have to make this introduction to test them. What was the point of that? The point of it is because he's trying to make a very important analogy between the fact that he's a prophet and between why they should believe in him. So he's making them acknowledge a very important principle which they have acknowledged. They said, yes, we're willing to believe you if you're reporting something to us that we're unable to see, but you're able to see it. And there's no time to even verify. You see, this is the important thing about his example. One of the best analogies, best examples you can come up with. There is no time to doubt what you're saying. Because if we doubt what you're saying, and we're thinking, you know what, we don't know, we need a few hours to think about it. The army will come in and it will destroy them, if he was right. Number two, they don't have time to get people to climb up the mountain and go and double check and verify. By that time, the army will have already seen them and will come over and they're going to be dead. So it's very interesting what he's saying. He's saying that I'm in a position right now physically that I can see something that you are not able to see, and you're not going to be able to see it in time. There's no time for you to get to the same position where I am. You may find out later, but now you have to take my word based upon trust. Now if you think about how that relates to his prophethood, a prophet is able to see and perceive things that the average human being cannot perceive in this lifetime. They will see them when they die. They will see them in the next life, but there's no time for you now, because no one else is going to be receiving prophethood. There's no time for you to see that. Only the prophet can know these things. So part of the reason why you're taking them, why you're believing in them, is you know their character, you know what kind of people they are, and you're taking them on their word. And also you're taking them on their belief that there's nothing strange about it. There's an army over the hill, it's come to attack. Nothing strange. If he said that, you know what, there's a 5-headed monster with, 3 wings outside over the mountain, maybe they would think, okay, we trust the guy, but he's reporting something really weird, right? Something really strange. That's the same thing with Islam. How do people build their belief? Number one, by knowing who the Prophet is, and his character, and his reputation. Number two, by looking at the message and saying, this makes sense. There's nothing strange about this. We're not asking you to believe that, Allah is, 5 people in one, or that you need to, do some weird kind of thing or something like that. There's nothing strange, nothing logically, strange about it, irrational about it. Right? You can't perceive certain things. You can't understand certain things because they're beyond your capacity, but they're not irrational or just crazy. There's a difference between two. One is being transcendent or beyond your understanding, and one is saying that this is just ridiculous. Two different things. So he's saying this is beyond you, but I can tell you because I'm a prophet. They acknowledge this and say, yes, we're willing to believe you in something we're not able to see. And then he said, well, I've been commanded by Allah to warn you, and I cannot protect you in this world. Now he's delivering the message full force, straightforward, because they've already acknowledged that. Now I cannot protect you in this world, nor can I promise you anything in the next world unless you acknowledge and submit to the worship of Allah alone. The message has been conveyed. Clear. They acknowledge the principle, the message has been conveyed. There's no wishy-washiness about it. They got the message. The message has reached them. He didn't say that, well, by the way, let me describe to you, what we've been doing lately. We've been praying, and this is the way we pray, and just letting you know who we are. And thank you very much for your time. Very clearly has conveyed the message to the people. Now what happened? People were shocked. People were stunned. They didn't know what to think. They're thinking, something's going on in their mind. They're thinking, whoa, everyone's quiet. Everyone's trying to figure out what should we do. The first person to break the silence is the Prophet's own uncle Abu Lahab. And Abu Lahab makes this comment, and he says, Tabban lak, may you be destroyed. Okay, this statement, Tabban lak, is really, really harsh. It's a very, very bad statement. It's like saying today, go to hell. In the context that we use today. Go to hell. So basically he's saying that, and then he said, you called us here for this? This is his response. And Abu Lahab is one of the important clan leaders. He's the uncle of the Prophet. He's from the clan of Hashim as well. He's one of the very important, prominent people in Mecca as well. So he has a status. Number two, he's an uncle of the Prophet. Now, in this society, family supports family. This is not like sometimes in American society, you have your family, making fun of you or something like that. This is a society where your uncle would always take your side. Your uncle always has your back. And now your uncle is not privately, but publicly making fun of you and telling you something like this. Really, really bad situation. So people are noticing this and they're seeing this. And what's his reason? What's his excuse? You called us here for this? He said, I'm out of here. And he started leaving, and other people started leaving along with him. Started following the crowd. No one else had anything to say. Because it's a very tribal society. You see a leader doing that, everyone's like, I'm not going to say something. Maybe I'll think about it when I get home, but I'm not going to say something in front of this situation here. So he did this and he left. Now, look at his reasoning. You called us here for this. Meaning, Abu Lahab's thinking, I don't have time for this. My life revolves around business. My life revolves around money. My life revolves around relaxation and enjoyment. I don't have time for these spiritual things and importance of life, purpose of life, and this is going to be, paradise and we have to worship. Don't bother me with these things. Mentality of many, many people today. You talk to them about the purpose of life, I don't have time, for that. If you want to discuss the news, or you want to discuss sports, or you want to go catch a coffee, when you want to catch a movie or something like that, I'm willing to give you 2 hours. I'll give you 4 hours. But to talk about something so serious, I don't have time. I don't even have 5 minutes to talk to you about this. This is the same mentality Abu Lahab is having at this point in time. So he leaves in protest. This is a waste of my time. I don't have time for this. Everyone else leaves. Everyone else disperses. Some follow him. Some just go back home and they say, we're not going to leave it. Setback. Major, major setback for the revelation. The first time the Prophet ﷺ was commanded to do this, and this is the reaction that he gets. Open reaction. Now what would many people do? Many people would get depressed. See, I tried and I failed and I'm never going to be able to do it. And, oh Allah, you told me to do it and you said you're going to suffice me against people like this. What suffice? Everyone left. His whole audience left. The entire thing didn't work. But he conveyed the message, but it didn't work. So, we're going to see what happens after this. Any questions? Question is, what was Abu Lahab's relationship with the Prophet ﷺ before Islam? We don't know the exact details, but there are reports that he was not directly, his uncle. He was uncle from the other side of the family, actually. So that's one of the reasons why Abu Talib was closer to him, because he was from the same side of the family. Abu Lahab was a little bit on the other side of the uncle from the other side. Other than that, we don't know exactly what his relationship is. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So that's a very good point. I'm glad you reminded me of that. That's one very important point. That the Prophet ﷺ's daughters were actually married. 2 of them were married to Abu Lahab's sons. So that kind of gives you a clarification on the relationship actually. So outside of that, we don't know incidents and conversations that took place between them, but that does show you that there's a pretty good relationship going on between the 2 of them. Okay, Jazakumullah khair for that. Okay, very good question. Very good question. Why is the word we used instead of the word I? Right? In fact, we have a Q&A bank on our website, iioc.com. It's going to launch next week. And one of the detailed answers that I wrote was actually an answer to this question. So the answer is, why is it we? This is what this is known in English as, not the royal we, there's another term as well. The majestic plural. Yeah, it's known as the majestic plural. And this is a style that exists in many languages. So using the plural to refer to yourself when you're talking, when you're expressing a sense of majesty. Kings and queens and all of these people, they use the we when they're actually referring to themselves. It shows like a grandeur. It shows like a high level. So this is something that takes place, in many places. Like the king of Saudi Arabia, he uses we still in Arabic. In India, where I studied, for example, all the people refer to themselves as we, because it used to be like a court type culture in the city of Lucknow. Everyone says like we are coming and we are going and we have arrived. It's just one person. but they're using the term we. Right? So this is something that was very common to indicate grandeur or majesty. Now, Allah uses this in the Quran, we, generally when He's trying to indicate His greatness or something like that. When it's more intimate conversation, He uses the term I. Now, why this is important to understand, or why this became a big issue, is because a lot of Christian missionaries tried to bring up the idea that the Quran supports the idea of Trinity because the word we is being used in the Quran. The very simple answer to that is, number one, many languages, including Hebrew and Arabic and Urdu and even English, they have the majestic plural. And it does not indicate that you're referring to multiple people, number one. The language is just like that, number one. Number two, you only find the plural in the first person. You will never find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ever being referred to as you plural, or being referred to as them plural by a prophet, praising him, or a prophet praying to him, or something like that. It only exists in the first person. If it existed in the second person or the third person, perhaps they could make some far-fetched argument. But there's absolutely no basis for this. And obviously, all the verses which speak against Trinity and that Allah is one make it very clear that there's no basis for this. But still, this gets pushed a lot and tries to confuse a lot of people. They say, look, why he uses the word we. They don't, but what they try to do is they try to confuse the Muslims into thinking that something about their own book or something like that. It's very common. You'd be surprised at how common it is. In fact, I have 2 books at home written by missionaries. This is one of an entire chapter dedicated to this. It's like, it's called God Loves You, My Muslim Friend. And then read this. And the entire chapter on this telling you about this. So it's there. It's there. Trust me, it's there. That was question number 3, right? Yeah, so continuing. So now the Prophet ﷺ has a setback. Major, not a major, you could say major setback, minor setback, whatever it is. But the mission continues. He continues. He doesn't stop, and that's the important thing. That's a very important lesson to learn. Is that when you get turned down, when you go and you speak to somebody and they reject you, and imagine how badly he was insulted by his own uncle in public. I mean, it can't get really worse than this. And with such a beautiful strategy he used, such a beautiful way of calling. He used the best strategy and it completely failed because of his uncle and all of these things in public. But the Prophet ﷺ continued with the mission. He continued to call people. And another thing to understand is the people, when they left, they never really considered Islam seriously. They just they had heard about it before. Now they're getting the message. You can't just stop and say, well, you know what, they've rejected, so let's leave them. They said no, stop bothering them. No. Had they really given it serious thought? No. So you don't just give up all of a sudden and say, well, he said no. So therefore, you know what, we're not going to talk to him ever again about this. We'll just continue to talk about other things. No, if you really want to give the message to somebody else, you continue to try. You try a different alternative. If you want something good for them, someone is addicted to drugs, and they're your friend, and you try and tell them, you know what, you need to stop. Someone's addicted to smoking, and you try to talk to them and say, this is really not good for your health. You say, no, I like it, so just leave me alone. Do you leave them alone? You say, well, they said no, so I'm never going to bring it up again. No, out of your love for them, you want them to stop. So you try to give it to them another way, or bring it up some other time. Or maybe, when they're in a different mood, you can talk to them or something. So the Prophet ﷺ continued to spread the message to the people. So he started going around Mecca and he started calling people. He started calling different groups here and there in a very wise ways like he did before. So he was calling people with wisdom and going and talking to them. And what was he met with? More rejection. More rejection. People are not interested. They don't want to hear the message. They don't want to leave their idolatrous ways. Now at this point in time, several verses from the Quran are being revealed. This is we're past the first phase now. We're in the middle phase of Makkah now. Verses are being revealed about Prophet Nuh, Prophet Noah, Prophet Ibrahim, Abraham, Prophet Yusuf, which is Joseph, Prophet Yunus, who's known as Jonah, Prophet Musa and Prophet Isa, Moses and Jesus, and other prophets. Verses are being revealed. Why? To show that, look, you're not alone. This is not the first time it's happened. When those prophets received the message, this is how they called their people. So use some of the techniques, use some of the language they used. And be prepared for rejection. They were rejected initially as well. Some of them were rejected for a very long time. Prophet Nuh, for example, for the most part he was rejected. Right? So he's learning now about what other people had gone through in the past. Very important time to reveal these stories. And keep in mind, there's no Jews living in Mecca at this time. So if anyone says, well, all these prophets were taken from, the Jews, the Jewish stories or something, that happened 15 years later, or 13 years later. It happened a long time later. You could say 10 years later, but it happened later. So it's not something that was taking place. So it was something that they're supposed to learn. The prophet is supposed to learn, the believers are supposed to learn the lesson from how these prophets were giving the message. So it teaches them technique, and it teaches them patience. You have to have patience while you're delivering the message. Now the Prophet ﷺ at this time, now that the call is public, the believers, and particularly him, they started praying at the Kaaba. He was praying at the Kaaba, and this also served as an invitation to people towards Islam. Even though he's not speaking. But what is he doing? He's at the Kaaba, and he's reciting verses of the Quran out loud in his prayer. What does that mean? They understand Arabic. They know what's being said. They're just listening to the Quran, and this is a way that he's calling other people to Islam. Some people are really upset that they don't want to hear it. Some people are listening and say, wow, that's interesting. Not accepting yet, but say, that's really interesting. So the message is being delivered in some way, shape, or form. Very good question. That was exactly the point. The question is, based upon this experience, does that mean we should start with our own family and invite them to Islam first before we go out to other people? Absolutely. As long as your family is, close to you. If your family is not close to you, then it's a little bit different. But generally, if your family is close to you, the people who are closest to you, you should always start with them. Because they're the ones who know you the most, they're the ones who trust you the most. Even if they're averse to it in the beginning, there's a way to do it, and there's a time to start opening up, to your family. So yeah, generally, you should start with your family. Generally, but just as a caveat, some people get the misunderstanding and they say, well, so if I just accept Islam and my family is really against it, the first people I should start with are my family? Not necessarily. I've written a book about this for new Muslims, that they should test their family first. Because now that they're living in as Muslim minorities, if they get kicked out of their house by their family because they really hate Islam and there's been a lot of propaganda or something like that, and they're young or they don't have a lot of money or something like that, maybe they should wait before telling their parents about Islam. They should even keep it secret for a little while until they can kind of be independent, so that they don't encounter too many hardships on them. So that's the rule, for brand new Muslims who are in danger. But the general rule, when this situation is not so bad, doesn't apply. The general rule is you always start with people who are closest to you, and that's your own family members. The question is, why were they praying at the Kaaba when they prayed in the direction of Jerusalem? Right? So they actually prayed at the Kaaba in the direction of Jerusalem. So they were facing in the direction of Jerusalem, but since you could pray at different sides of the Kaaba, they would face this way, and they would pray in the direction of Jerusalem as well. So they're praying in the direction of the Kaaba as well as in the direction of Jerusalem. Okay, let's continue with the last slide then. So now what happened? The Prophet ﷺ is conveying the message, and people are rejecting it. But the important thing to understand is, why are they rejecting it? And are these good reasons that they have? Are they legitimate, solid reasons that they have for rejecting it? Well, let's look at it. Some of the reasons why they were rejecting. Number one, it's not so easy to change your culture or change your tribal customs once you've lived your life one way for a very long time. So people, especially when they're a little bit older, they're very averse to change. They don't, they've been living, they're so comfortable with their culture, they're so comfortable with the way things are, they don't want to change in their life. They're very, if it's not broken, even if it is broken, you don't try and fix it anyways. Don't try and change it anyways. Because they were very happy. So you find that people who are highly cultural don't like to go against their culture at all on anything. And these were very cultural, tribal people. Anything which will go against what they're used to is anathema to them. They're disliking it. It's repulsive. That's one reason. The second reason is their high respect and esteem that they had for their ancestors. Now, not all the way back for their ancestors, because remember, their ancestry all the way back to Prophet Ismail kind of got a little bit blurry up there somewhere. So which ancestors are they really looking up to? The more immediate ones. The last, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. And those were people who were already worshipping idols. So for them, if it's good enough for our grandparents and good enough for, the previous generations, how can someone come and tell us that they were wrong? They're the people who we idolize. They're the people who we hold in esteem. How dare someone come and tell us that what they were doing was incorrect? If they were worshipping idols, that's what we're going to do. So that's number one. Another reason. Number two, which their high esteem for their ancestors and the previous generations. Number three, they were actually scared. They were a little bit scared. Some of them were scared of their idols. That they were told that if you mess with this idol, you're going to get bad luck. Or if you do this, you're going to get, like people in America are scared. Even though they don't believe, they don't really believe that if you break a mirror, you're going to get 7 years of bad luck. But some people say, but just in case, I'm not going to dispose of that mirror. Let somebody else take it and throw it in the trash. I'm not going to do it. You handle it. Right? They have that thing in the back. It might happen, I just want to take it safe. So they were doing the same thing. I don't want to mess with the idol, I'm just going to give him a little food from from time to time so he doesn't mess with me. I'll be okay. So they thought it might be bad luck. The idol will curse them. Something will happen to them. The next reason is that the leaders were in control of Mecca. They feared that they may lose their position. They may lose their power. Because if everyone is following this idol worship and then they come with something new, what's going to happen? If the people don't accept it as well, these guys are ousted. So you know what? We lost our career. We just lost our position. It's like a politician today. He knows something is wrong. He knows, some injustice is taking place. Some, secret prison is torturing people through waterboarding or something. And we don't close it down because our reputation is on the line. Not to point at anybody, but these kind of things happen, right? So what do we have? You're scared to lose your power. And you won't be in that position of power anymore. So they were scared because they don't know for sure if their followers will follow them or not. So power took precedence over truth for them. The other thing was they may lose their business at the Kaaba. Because remember the Kaaba during pilgrimage season, it's a magnet. Everyone from Arabia is coming over there. And there's festivals. And they're selling. And there's buying. And there's trade going on and everything. This is what made the city. Now it's already become idolatrous. If you take the idols away and everyone's into the idols, you just lost your city. Maybe someone else, they'll go somewhere else. There were other places and shrines and temples where idols were being worshipped as well. So if they lose their status over here, people go, well, we're not going to worship there anymore. We'll go where the other idol is. Because for them, they're equal opportunity idolaters, right? If this idol is not going to do it, we're going to go to the other one. Because he's going to go ahead and do what we need to do, whatever it is. The next is they would lose their freedom to act immorally. Now they weren't thinking immorally, meaning they would lose their freedom. Right? This is a problem that people have, that when you come with the message, and the message is telling you that, look, this is from Allah, and you should be a righteous person. You have to organize your life according to principles that are coming from Allah. They think, well, so I can't drink anymore. I can't eat whatever I want. I have to pray now. I can't just sleep, 24 hours or one day if I just feel like just chilling out and doing nothing. I just can't do that. So they feel like they're losing their freedom, like they're kind of shackles being put on them or something like that. Maybe even if people want to live a righteous life, they want that, I want the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want, even if it's ridiculous. Even if it's something that's bad for me, I want to do it anyways. And they know that this is going to be a restriction on them, so they're concerned with their freedom. And a lot of people have this mentality, this way of thinking, that if we enter into a righteous life, or we start following the guidance from Allah, then we're going to not be able to do all the things that we enjoyed doing before. We can't go get drunk over here, and we can't party over there, and we can't play around with these type of things and all that. This is a problem that people have. So these are some of the reasons, among probably others, that they had for not accepting the message of the Prophet ﷺ. But they were not the type of people who just reject and just kind of sit on the sidelines. These are people who are active. Remember we talked about some of the good qualities of the Arabs. When they're convinced about something, then they are willing to fight for it. So now they're convinced and they have this belief that no, we're not going to accept this guy. and we're not going to accept him, and he's going to keep, talking to us, we're going to go ahead and fight against him. So how do they start fighting against him? Many, many different strategies they used. Number one, they would use insults and accusations. So they would insult the Prophet. They would call him names, they would call him bad things, and they would make accusations against him. And why were they insulting him? Some of the things was, you have no wealth. You're not one of the richest people in the city. And you have no power, meaning you're not one of the most powerful people in the city. So why should you be a prophet when you don't have the same money as I have, and you don't have the same power as I have? So their understanding was, Allah should give prophethood and status to somebody who has money and power. That's the way they measured things. But that's not the way that Allah measures things. So that's one of their accusations they had. The second was, a lot of accusations, they called him a magician. Right? Now why would they call him a magician? A magician meaning like a sorcerer. Now where did they come up with this sorcerer thing? Because they saw that the people who started following him were so dedicated, and their lives had changed and transformed to such an extent, they say it's like the guy had cast a spell on them. So they saw people who were really dedicated to Islam, said this is not normal, right? No one should be this dedicated, because they're very lazy maybe themselves. They look at someone else, this guy should not be dead. Something happened to him. Somebody bewitched him, someone cast a spell on him, he must have done something like that. Number two, they started saying that he's a poet. Now why are they saying that he's a poet? Because he's coming with verses from the Quran. Now for them, poetry was a style and a language. They knew that poetry, the Quran was not like poetry. They knew that. But what else can they say? They say, well, what does this guy do? What is his profession? He's like any other poet. He just comes up with some stuff, and it's for the sake of entertainment. It's very nice poetry. Maybe we'll hang it on the Kaaba or something, but when we move on, we don't take it very seriously. Number three, they said he's insane. So they said, this guy's crazy. He's saying that he's receiving a revelation from Allah, someone that we can't see, and now he's telling us that we have to change our lives because of this revelation. This guy must be insane, he must be crazy. Then they challenged him to bring miracles. They said, we want you to take this mountain and you need to turn it into gold. And if you can't do it right now, then we're not going to believe you. If you do it, then we'll believe you. So they asked him to do really ridiculous things. We want right now, we want you to do this and we want you to do that. And then some of them said, you know what? Even if you did that, I still wouldn't believe in you. But yeah, I want to see you do it anyways. Right? So they're not really being tested by their miracles. And the interesting thing to note, very, very interesting observation. One of the scholars, this hit me. One of the scholars observed, if you look at the vast majority of people throughout history who've believed in any of the prophets, the vast majority never believed due to a miracle. In fact, miracles, for the most part, serve the opposite purpose. It served the purpose to seal the argument against the people who disbelieved. Very interesting, because at least for a while, I had thought that the miracle is like the important thing to build the faith. But it's not necessarily. In fact, when he explained it, it made more sense. It's actually the opposite. It's to seal the argument against people who are going to disbelieve. So they started saying, bring a miracle, bring a miracle. The Quran itself was a miracle. It was miraculous enough, but they wanted like a physical miracle. For them, they knew, they were astonished, they were stunned by the Quran, and they couldn't explain it either. That was a miracle in and of itself, but they wanted something physical. We want, some amazing thing to happen, in the sky or something like that. The other reason they fought against him, or the other way or reason they fought against him, was there was a lot of clan rivalry. So remember, there's a tribe. The tribe is composed of different clans. So among the clans that were really prominent were Hashim, which we talked about, and there was two other clans, Umayyah and Makhzum. Two other very important clans who were quite powerful in Mecca among Quraysh. And these clans would always be competing with one another. Even though they were family, but everyone wants to kind of be on top. They want to be a little bit more, they want to outdo the other person. So for example, it's time to throw a party, right? And you want to invite everyone. One clan would be like, okay, we're going to outdo the party that they had last time. We're going to step it up one star, a little bit higher. And the other one, oh, they did a little bit better. Next time, we're going to do a little bit better. We'll add a little bit more food. We'll add a little bit more hospitality. And our status will be elevated. So they were competing with everything. They would compete in charity. Who could give more charity? Who can take better care of the pilgrims? Who could do this? Who could trade? Who could make more money? All of these things. They were competing. Now the thing is, By the way, Umayyah was one of the tribes who the most hostility came from them because they were in direct competition. They were in direct competition. And it's interesting and somewhat ironic that you have the Umayyad Khalifa afterwards. Bani Umayyah actually was responsible later on, 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ, for spreading Islam the most. Throughout the world, they were one of the people who were very, very responsible for spreading the message to so many different countries. So Allah has a plan, people have a plan, Allah has a plan. You find that some of the hostility came from here. Why? Because here's the thing. If you throw a party, and then the other clan says, well, we can do a better party than that. And then they give charity and say, we can give better charity than that. How are you going to compete with the clan who's saying, we have a prophet receiving revelation directly from Allah? You can't compete with that. So they automatically lose. There's no way the rivalry is over. If they accept that the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet of Allah. So for many people in these clans, one of the things that stopped them was, we can't allow this clan to be on top. We'll never beat them. There's no way we can win. This is a lose-lose situation. So that's another reason. So for the most part, the hostility was coming from these two clans. With the one exception, right? The one exception was Abu Lahab, coming from inside the clan of Hashim. One of the people who, he was from the own clan, and that's why it made it even worse. He came from within. Otherwise, most of the hostility against the Prophet was coming from outside of his own family, outside of the clan. Now we're talking about the year after he started publicly calling people to Islam. Now the season for pilgrimage is coming. The Hajj time is coming up. What's going to happen during pilgrimage season? Everyone around the entire region is going to come to Mecca. Now they're concerned because if he's openly proclaiming Islam, now everyone, not just in Mecca, everyone around Arabia is going to find out about Islam. Because he's not going to stop, he's going to keep spreading the message. So now we need to make sure that we keep our city stable, intact, we make sure our position is clear, and we somehow stop the other people from getting the message of Islam. So what's going to be the best tactic for us? So they started discussing, and they started thinking. And in fact, one incident occurred where they started deciding, and they said, well, let's go and tell people that he's a fortune teller. That he's just one of those people who kind of tells the future, looks into charms and amulets, and looks into the teacup or whatever they used at that time, and he can tell the future, and that's what he's doing. You don't need to really pay. He's like any of these other guys who have like the little fortune teller shop in the corner. He's one of those guys. Don't worry about him. Don't pay him any attention. If you want to go and to get the future known, you can go for it, but no need to waste your money. That's what they thought about. And then they say, you know what? It's not going to work because he doesn't resemble a fortune teller. Everyone knows what the fortune tellers are like. Like today, we know you go to, hopefully you don't go, but I mean, you see the fortune teller, right? You sit on the table and they have the little glass ball, they have the cards, tarot card, whatever they're doing, we kind of know what kind of style they have. He doesn't have any of that. He doesn't resemble any of that. He doesn't even talk like they talk. So they say, this is not going to work. It's an idea, but it's not a very good idea. People are not going to believe it. They said, okay, you know what? Let's say he's insane. He's possessed by a demon, he's gone crazy. This kind of answers the accusation that, why did he feel he might have been possessed the first time? They said, let's say he's insane, he's possessed, he's just crazy. They say, yeah, okay, that might work, but it's not a very good thing, because people know what possession looks like. The guy doesn't look crazy, he's not rolling on the floor, he's not yelling and shouting, he's not raising his voice, he's not doing anything that a crazy person, so who's going to believe us if we tell them that, and then they look at him and they meet him? He doesn't look crazy. In fact, he looks like one of the most intelligent people. So we're gonna look foolish. This is not gonna work. So they said, okay, that's not the best idea. Let's say he's just a poet. So we're gonna use that one, And they say, look, it's not gonna work either because everyone knows poetry. Everyone in Arabia is really good at poetry, and poetry has a certain meter. It has a certain style of rhyming. They say this Quran that he's bringing doesn't resemble any poetry. The moment he starts reciting, people are going to be like, that's not poetry. That's something we've never seen before. Because it's neither prose nor poetry. It doesn't match any of the meters or any of the style of poetry. So they're going to say, they said he's a poet. This is not poetry. This is something else. So they lied to us. So they said, you know what, that's not the best idea. Then they said, let's say he's a sorcerer. He's bewitching people and he's controlling their minds and everything like that. And they say, that's not going to work either because he doesn't resemble he doesn't resemble what a sorcerer does. He doesn't look like him. He's not hanging around. Like sorcerers used to do a lot of weird things. They used to hang out in the woods and the forest. They used to, do certain strange things, right? Like witches and all that. We kind of know what they resemble. So he says, he's not doing any of that either. So they're out of ideas. And they say, well, which one? We got to pick one of these. So which one is the best to pick? We pick the sorcerer. Why? Because it has the most fear. It scares people the most. If you go near a sorcerer and he bewitches you, or he bewitches one of your kids, it's over for you. There's nothing you can do. So the best thing is a scare tactic. The fear factor. Just scare them so much that they won't even go near him. That's what we're going to do. So what did they do? They stationed people with this propaganda, like little propaganda machines, right? Stationed on the outskirts of the city. While people are coming into the city of Mecca, before they even get inside the city, before any Muslim can go and tell them about Islam, they kind of fill their ears a little bit. By the way, there's a sorcerer, what's the news from last year? Oh yeah, this year we have a little epidemic. Nothing major, but there's this sorcerer guy, and he's bewitching people. You better watch out. Don't even get your family near him, otherwise you're going to lose your family. And everyone's going to be messed up. So they got really scared. It shows you propaganda has always been about fear throughout history. Hasn't changed. It's the same thing. You just get them to be scared so much that they're not going to think about it, and they'll try their best not to learn anything about it because they're so afraid, they're so scared. So this is what they did, and this is the period of mass rejection. So now the people are coming, and they come to Mecca, and the Prophet ﷺ is trying to spread the message, and still he's not very successful because the Quraysh are against him and they're fighting against the message and they're making fun of him and they're rejecting the message themselves. So, and we'll stop here inshallah ta'ala. Any questions? Yeah, I don't think we have time to share it, but yes, it's true that I believe his name was Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, and he was one of the great poets of the time, and he tried not to listen to the Quran. He was told not to listen. But he's like, what? Let me listen to this. I'm an expert in this field. I'm not going to be affected by this. So he listened to it, and he was so surprised and so shocked at the amazing, literary features and how amazing the Quran was that he immediately accepted Islam. And he actually spread Islam as well. He becomes a very important character in Islamic history. And we'll probably cover his life a little bit more in detail. That's a very important point. Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi, I believe, if I recall correctly. He's from the tribe of Daws for sure. I believe it's Tufail ibn Amr. Okay, was it true that Khalid ibn al-Walid coined the term sorcerer for the Prophet? Not that I recall. In fact, Khalid ibn al-Walid was not mentioned in any of these narrations. There were some, I forgot exactly who it was, but it definitely was not Khalid ibn al-Walid. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was Walid ibn al-Mughira. He was the one. He was the one who coined the term. Maybe not coined the term, but he's the one who made this decision. Anyways, the decision to go with sorcerer, if not coined the term himself. Are we keeping up with the test? I've noticed that almost 50% of the people have not been taking the test who are enrolled in the class. You don't want to take it. Did you notify the TA about it already? Okay, if you could please notify the TA, because we're going to start dropping people who are not taking the test, and they've not notified us that they don't want, because it becomes very difficult to keep track of everything. So if you could do that, if you don't want to do it, please notify the TA and let him know that, I'm just an observer. I'm not interested in taking the test, and we can figure out an easier way for it. You can still stay in the class, inshallah ta'ala. The sign-in sheet is gone. If you look at the announcements, the role has changed. The role has changed, which doesn't mean you should not come to class. Yes. All right, inshallah, may Allah allow us to understand these lessons and practice them in our lives. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum.